The 4th Battalion was an infantry battalion of the Australian Army that was raised for service during World War II, as part of the 2nd Australian Imperial Force, deploying to the Middle East in early 1940. The battalion took part in the early fighting in North Africa in early 1941 along with the rest of the 6th Division, before being sent to Greece and then Crete, where it was heavily engaged and suffered heavy losses. Rebuilt in Palestine, the battalion undertook occupation duties in Syria. In early 1942, it returned to Australia in response to Japan's entry into the war, and subsequently undertook a long period of defensive duties and training in Darwin, and then North Queensland, while other elements of the 6th Division saw action in New Guinea in 1942–43. The 4th saw no combat again until late in the war, when it was committed to the Itape-Wewak campaign in late 1944, fighting throughout the remainder of the war. Following the end of hostilities, the battalion was disbanded in Australia in November 1945. History. The 4th Battalion was raised on 3 November 1939 at Victoria Barracks in Sydney, New South Wales, as part of the all-volunteer 2nd Australian Imperial Force. Amongst the first batch of troops raised as part of the new force, the battalion was initially attached to the 16th Brigade, which was assigned to the 6th Division, consisting of 4 rifle companies, designated A to D, under a headquarters company and a battalion headquarters. Like other 2nd AIF infantry battalions raised at the time, the battalion had an authorized strength of around 900 personnel. The colors chosen for the battalion's unit color patch were the same as those of the 4th Battalion, which had been raised for service during World War I as part of the 1st Australian Imperial Force, and had subsequently been re-raised as Militia Battalion. These colors were white over green, in a horizontal rectangular shape, although a border of grey was added to the UCP to distinguish the battalion from its militia counterpart. Rudimentary training was undertaken at Ingleburn, New South Wales, before the 4th embarked for overseas on 10 January 1940. Departing from Sydney aboard the Strathnaver following a march through the city, they sailed via Fremantle and Colombo. The 4th arrived in mid-February, following a reorganisation of the structure of the Australian Army, which saw each infantry brigade reduced from 4 infantry battalions to 3. The battalion was reallocated to the 19th Brigade. This change occurred while the 4th was at sea, and after arriving in the Middle East, it concentrated at a camp at Kilo 89, near Gaza, in Palestine, where it joined the 8th and 11th Battalions. It undertook further exercises and training in Egypt and Palestine prior to the Australians being committed to the fighting against the Italians in the Libyan desert in January 1941 during Operation Compass. A series of actions were fought by the Australians around Bardia, Tobruk and Erna, before the 4th entered Benghazi in February. In reserve at Bardia, the battalion's main action came around Erna in April 1941, as the Allies grew concerned about a German invasion of Greece. The combined force of British, Australian and New Zealand troops were deployed there from North Africa. It was a short-lived campaign, as the Germans advanced quickly, rapidly pushing the Allies back. In freezing temperatures, the 4th was heavily engaged around Vevi, in northern Greece near the border with Yugoslavia, but also found itself being evacuated by the end of the month, departing from Megara, evacuated by sea to Crete, after the Germans launched an airborne invasion of the strategically important island on the 20th of May. The 4th fought around Heraklion airfield, but was withdrawn once again by the end of the month. being taken off the island aboard several British destroyers. After arriving in Alexandria, the battalion was rebuilt in Palestine, making up its losses from the earlier campaigns from new reinforcements in Palestine. In the wake of the Syria-Lebanon campaign, the battalion deployed to Syria as part of the Allied occupation force established there to defend against a possible German invasion through the Caucasus. They remained there until January 1942, when the 19th Brigade embarked for the return to Australia following Japan's entry into the war, while other elements of the 6th Division were sent to New Guinea in late 1942 and early 1943 and saw combat against the Japanese along the Kokoda Track and around war. The 19th Brigade was allocated to defensive duties in Darwin, Northern Territory. They remained there until June 1943, when the 19th Brigade was moved to northern Queensland as the 6th Division's other two brigades, the 16th and 17th, returned to Australia from New Guinea. As the division was brought back up to strength, a long period of training followed. Consequently, it was not until late in the war that the 2/4 was committed to its first, and only, campaign against the Japanese, deploying to Itapewiwak in November 1944, as the Australians took over from U.S. forces in the region. The 19th Brigade was initially tasked with securing the area between around the Driniamore, Dantmap and Danimul rivers, and throughout the final months of the war, the battalion undertook an amphibious landing around Butt, before joining the advance towards Wewak, which fell on the 10th of May, before pushing into the Prince Alexander Range in the interior before the fighting came to an end in August 1945. Following the end of hostilities, the 2/4 Battalion was disbanded in Chermside on the 12th of November 1945. During its service, a total of 2,624 men served with the 2/4 Battalion, of whom were 94 killed, 243 were wounded and 195 were captured. One of the unit's soldiers, Private Edward Kenner, received the Victoria Cross for his actions during an attack on the Wairui mission in May 1945. In addition, members of the battalion also received the following decorations: 1 Distinguished Service Order, 9 Military Crosses, 6 Distinguished Conduct Medals, 11 Military Medals, and 53 mentions in dispatches. 2 members of the 2/4 were invested as members of the Order of the British Empire. Battle Honours. The 2/4 received the following battle honours for its involvement in the war: Bardia 1941, capture of Tobruk, Viv, Sota, Heraklion, Wewak, Wairui mission, and Mount Shaburong, Mount Tazaki. These honours were subsequently entrusted to the 4th Battalion in 1961, and through this link are maintained by the Royal New South Wales Regiment. Commanding officers. The following officers commanded the 2/4 during the war: Lieutenant Colonel Percival Parsons, Lieutenant Colonel Ivan Doherty, Lieutenant Colonel Nevis Farrell, and Lieutenant Colonel Geoffrey Cox.